Episode 67, Graham Elwood. Graham Elwood is a comedian, filmmaker, and podcaster. Also, he's my good friend. We've toured multiple countries together. Heck, we even toured a different continent. We vent some frustrations about the YouTube space. We go down memory lane. Some good ones, some not so good ones. This is an appropriate December episode. Please welcome to the show, Graham Elwood. Graham Elwood. Dude, what's up?
How are you, man?
Oh, man. So you're a comedian. Yeah. Wouldn't it be funny if that was the whole interview?
Asking me, oh my God. What kind of comedy do you do?
We do this really generic interview. You give like really generic answers. I just love making people laugh. If I can bring a smile to one person's face, I've won.
I think my jokes are like healing, like essential oils.
And it's for everybody. Isn't it weird when comics give that generic ass answer when they're like oh, what brought you to comedy? And they do say, I just love making people laugh. I mean, clearly you like making people laugh, but
yeah, obviously that's
like that's it. Like that'd be like, I don't know, if I went to a doctor's office and we were making small talk and I was like, oh, what made you want to be a doctor? Oh, I just like healing people. And that was it. There's nothing more to that doctor's input as to why they chose that profession. I feel like I might switch up. You know what I mean?
Maybe you're not the best physician for me at this moment.
I just love healing people. What happens when you don't? Oh, they die. It's a drag. But when I heal them, it's great.
Okay, thanks, Doc.
All right, like that's it. Like it wasn't like, oh, I'm curious about. I don't know, man. I want a solid origin story. I want like I lost a relative to this horrible thing, and I have made it my life's work to cure that terrible thing. And unfortunately, that terrible thing's not what's bothering you, so you're kind of fucked. But my life's work is I'm going to cure this thing.
This very sort of tunnel vision, dark doctor. I want to meet this guy who's just like
me too. I want to go to this guy. He's out there. Drop us an email. You got two new patients.
Follow us on social media, Dr. Darkness, and we want to learn about you.
So, all right. So for people who don't know who you are, though, give like a brief, like, I mean, most people who know, yeah, a lot of people are going to know you already. But for anyone who doesn't, I'd like to think that because I'm interviewing 1,000 people, like years from now, people are going to discover this journey and they're going to be like, oh, yeah, this is like this was the early days of the 1,000 Project. And maybe not all of them will know who Graham Elwood is. Maybe some of them will be like, we just know him from the cat stuff. He did political comedy too.
So in the future, I'm doing a lot of cat stuff?
Me. That's why they know me.
Oh,
I'm doing the cat stuff.
All right, you're doing the cat stuff. And maybe it's like years from now, I'll have some Jay Johnston like flip out and be a part of some like, really? That guy used to be a comedian? The guy that led the revolution? That was nuts.
Oh, that'd be wild. I mean, you do that, I'll plug the fuck out of this episode. I'll be like, before he was a revolutionary, he used to do a live stream about politics and Bitcoin and whatever else tickled his fancy, surfing, vegan smoothies.
So it sounds like I need to start a revolution just to kind of help the numbers of this show.
Just to help the numbers of the show, especially your particular episode. I mean, it would really bump this episode when it comes out. Like you lead a revolution and then all of a sudden, you know, it's like the later episodes will hopefully have higher numbers. That's usually how podcasts work. And then this random number, which will likely be 60 something, will have like these obscene numbers because it was the revolution guy.
Yeah, that guy?
Ron interviewed the revolution guy in the first 100 episodes, even.
It's crazy.
Wild.
Well, yeah, here's my origin story. Apart from sounds like I'm going to lead a revolution in the future. I'm some
Nice.
sort of like John Connor type. That was a movie reference. Ron didn't get it, but it's okay.
I didn't.
You didn't get that at all. You didn't get that at all.
No, I didn't.
God, this is so great. I'm just going to let your audience tell you what that is when this episode drops.
Someone will. Someone will email me. And thank you in advance to that person. Please let me know. Please let me know.
Yeah, I've been a stand-up comic. My origin story is I knew I could never hold a real job. So I became a stand-up comic when I was a freshman at college at the University of Arizona. I was a film major there. I played lacrosse my first year there, but then I really just started focusing on...
Really? I didn't know that about you.
Oh, yeah.
Dude, all the hours we've spent in a car and you played a sport in college and that never came up.
Yeah, I guess it was...
That's so random. See, that's why I do this thing. Look, I mean, I never knew that about that. Anyway, all right. So you played lacrosse. All right. That's awesome. And you don't like hurling. You realize that hurling inspired lacrosse. Hurling walked so that lacrosse could run.
Well, that is maybe disputable, Ron, because lacrosse...
It is disputable because of geography, yes. But...
Yes. And lacrosse is the actual true American sport, because Native Americans did lacrosse before their villages would try. The lacrosse games would be like days long, and it was nuts. It started as a Native American sport. So yes, I played lacrosse just for a year in college with the University of Arizona. And I was a club sport at the time. But it was still pretty competitive. And I wasn't obviously good enough to play, get like a D1 scholarship at any of those East Coast schools where lacrosse is like a scholarship sport, like Syracuse and North Carolina and Duke and the Ivy Leagues. It's a D1 scholarship sport. And I was not good enough to do that. But yeah, I played it in high school and I played it for a year in college. And then I decided that, there was no like career for me as a pro athlete. That wasn't going to happen. So I also had been the class clown and all that kind of stuff. And so I started doing stand up, and at the University of Arizona, I switched my major to film, and then my junior year joined a comedy sketch group called Comedy Corner, which I think is still there. I don't know. It was started by Gary Shandling, because he was from Tucson. And so, and the first time I ever did stand up, the MC had acid wash jeans and a mullet, and his name is Judd Apatow.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Wow.
And
he did okay.
He's done all right. Yes, he's done all right.
That guy.
Done all right for himself. And so, yeah, I started doing stand up. I didn't have a car in college, and Laughs Comedy Club, which was way off campus, a good half hour away from campus where I was living. Sometimes I would ride my bikes there with another buddy. I used a fake ID to do open mics. Wow. Because you had to be 21 to get in there. So that's when I started doing stand-up. Then I was in a sketch comedy group in college. And then I'm from Chicago originally. So I went back to Chicago after I graduated and then started pursuing stand-up full time. And within a year of graduation from college, I was making my living as a stand-up comic. I quit my job waiting tables, and this was in Chicago in the early 90s. And so I was in the same group of comics with, people like Mike Schmidt, Jimmy Dore, Jimmy Pardo, Paul Gilmartin, Carla Felicia. And so working in Chicago too, I saw Bill Hicks come to town. I saw him live. At the Funny Firm. And at the time there was 12 full-time comedy clubs or 14 or something in the Chicago area. There was 400 seat rooms. There was the Funny Firm and the Improv were like 2 blocks from each other in downtown Chicago. And they were both packed every night. And, that's how I just started making my living as a stand-up comic and driving around and doing all these gigs. And then I moved to LA and started pursuing, I got an agent and kind of took myself off the road a little bit and just pursued like doing sets around town in LA. And I got an agent and a manager, and then, got to do some late night talk shows, and I started hosting game shows. I got into that world. And then made movies and got into podcasting and co-produced the Los Angeles Podcast Festival. And almost 8 years ago now.
I missed that festival, man.
I know that festival was
I
great.
wish you and Dave and everybody else would just take on hours of unpaid labor and have a bunch of people complain and only a handful actually appreciate it, so that we could have Los Angeles Podcast Festival again.
Boy, you paint such a rosy picture, Ron. Yeah, it is. It really is. It's like we barely made any money. It was such a cool thing. I mean, some of the comics were definitely whiners, but most of them were pretty solid. It was such a cool experience. But you're right. I mean, we had to shut it down because we were doing all this work. It was like 9 months out of your life.
Yeah, it's a fuckload of work to do something like that. I mean, it
was like, but I learned so much, and that job helped me get a job being a director and executive producer of the First Nations Comedy Experience. And yeah, and so in the last, I've been doing political vigilante for like almost 8 years now, and I'm switching it to this Bitcoin vigilante where I'm just talking more travel, because I'm sure we'll get into this, very burnt out talking about politics.
We're gonna get into it big time.
Yeah, I'm sure we are.
My prep for this interview was just like 4 words. You know what I mean? Like it was just like it's just. And one of them is just cults with a question mark. Like that's like I can just show you right now. Like it's just so I remember to like hit this beat, so we don't so we don't get off tangent on something else for an entire hour. Right. And then I'm like, oh, we never talked about this. But yeah. So that's why. Here's one thing I actually don't know. Why Arizona? Why'd you end up in Arizona?
That's a great question. I was born actually in Wisconsin, and I lived in Wisconsin, in Madison, Wisconsin, until I was about 11. My parents had gotten divorced, and so my mom and my brother and I moved to Chicago when I was 11, right before my 12th birthday. And so I'd spent my whole life in cold weather. And I was like, everyone in my high school, my dad was a professor at the University of Wisconsin. My sisters went there. My brother went to Purdue. Most of my friends from high school were going to Big Ten schools like Indiana, where you went. And I had a bunch of friends that went to Indiana. And I was just like, I need to see my whole life. Ever since I was a kid, I'm just like, I want to go see more. I want to see what else is out there. And I want to go where it's warm. I just was like, I want to go where it's warm. And I had never really been out to the West. We drove when I was like 12. We drove to Idaho for a family reunion. That was the first time I got to see like Wyoming and sort of mountains and big sky country type stuff. And I was really like, wow, I love the West. And so I had never been to California. I had never been to the ocean. We'd never been to Florida. We just stayed in the Midwest most of the first 18 years of my life. And so other than living in Germany for a year, we can get into that. That was a different experience, but so I wanted to go where it was warm, and I wanted to go to a part of the country I'd never been before. And I'm dating myself here, but this is before the internet, so I was like, University of Arizona looks cool, and I had this book of colleges and was just going through this book of colleges, and Arizona looked like. I was like, you know what? I wanted to go to a big state school because I liked going to this. We grew up, in Madison. We had season tickets to Wisconsin Badger football games. And I wanted that college experience of like going to big games and having a school that had decent athletic programs and stuff. And I was like, okay. And there was like maybe 1 or 2 other people from my high school going to school there. I applied. I got this brochure in the mail. I applied to Arizona, Arizona State, Florida, Florida State, Alabama, and University of Washington.
Yeah. So you wanted to change the scenery big time. Yeah. I mean, that's the way to do it.
And I never visited the school. I just saw a brochure and I was like, I'm
Oh,
going.
wow.
And it was so much fun. When I got there, it was warm weather and there were beautiful girls everywhere. And I was away from college and I didn't have to deal with my parents or any of their craziness. And I was like, I had never felt that much freedom in my life. I was just like, yeah. I mean, this was just, and I, became buddies. There's still guys I'm still friends with from my dorm in college. And yeah. And then Lucy.
Yeah, Lucy says hi. She probably recognizes your voice.
Yeah.
Except she can't hear it because I have headphones on. So I think she just wants attention, but that happens. No, dude, that's awesome. I never knew if there was like a particular reason or just like, hey, it's time for some adventure. I mean, I was the same way when I turned 18. I desperately just wanted to get out of my hometown, and college was the obvious ticket. And so I just wanted like a new experience. I wanted to kind of spread my wings.
Yeah. And then, my high school, I went to Evanston Township High School in Chicago. It was a pretty diverse school, but your high school is still very sort of insulated of that, whatever area you grew up in. And, going to college in Arizona, there was kids from all over the country there. I mean, my roommates were like from New York, Minnesota, Connecticut, California, like meeting all the kids from California. I was like, wow, they're just different. They just there's just a cool vibe about California. I don't know. They just like seemed like, I don't know. They all like surfed and did cool outdoor stuff, and they were all like good athletes. And it was I fell in love with the West. I was on the lacrosse team, and we like had a road game I made the travel team, and we played a game at UC Santa Barbara, and we drove up to California, and I was like, this is the coolest thing I had ever seen. And I went in the ocean in Newport Beach, and I was just like, I was enamored with the West Coast.
Yeah, man. I mean, that's pretty wild too. I didn't realize you weren't you were in college when you saw the ocean for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
I never knew that about you. I mean, I always wonder what that would be like, because it's like the one thing. I grew up in the Midwest, it's disputed whether or not Pittsburgh's the Midwest, but that could be someone else's hill to die on. But like going to the beach once a year was the big thing, and you cherished every second. So I always had this huge appreciation for the ocean. Like we would go, my mom would literally take her meals on the sand and stuff because she didn't want to lose a moment. Like she goes, I get this once a year. I'm not missing anything. I'm not leaving here until it's dinner time. I'm not going up for lunch. I'm not going someone could bring a sandwich down or something. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess that probably rubbed off, and that's why part of the reason why I love the beach so much now. And
I think too, so when Chicago has Lake Michigan and Evanston, the town I grew up in, so the beaches, in the summer, it's similar like Pittsburgh or whatever. You have this 3-month window of nice weather where you can go to the beach. And so we would go to the beach almost every day in high school in the summer. And then, so I did start to fall in love with that beach culture, even though it was like a big lake. And so when I got to the Pacific Ocean, I was like, wow, this is, and I remember body surfing just the first time I got in the ocean and just had a wave just carry my body. I was like, oh, wow, this was fantastic. It was the coolest experience going to California for the first time in college.
Yeah, dude, that sounds awesome. So let's dive into some other stuff here. Cults, might as well. It's one of the words. You've been talking about cults a lot recently, and I feel like it may or may not have something to do with some of the experiences that you and I have had over the past handful of years.
What do you mean? I mean, what are you talking about?
We're gonna dive into even more specifics here in a little bit, but yeah. So what's that experience been like for you? Just the experience of talking about cults, how it's circulating in your stand-up now, and just any points of association you'd like to make?
I mean, this is a hard pivot from like lacrosse and the beach to cults, Ron. But yeah,
Well, actually, it's not, because Graham, California leads the nation in cultic activity, and it has for a long time. I think Charles Manson started that trend, and no one's surpassed him as of yet. California, #1 with a bullet in cultic activity. So it was a very natural transition.
So, all right, this is great. I think all of this cult question and my talking about it, I think, is very much interwoven in terms of my journey with starting Political Vigilante, because it was after and that journey even goes back to, I lost my house in 2010, which I've talked about a lot, and that sort of, and then going to the war zones. So I went, for the audience that doesn't know, I've done 7 comedy tours in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Kuwait, starting in 2004 through 2012. So I got to see the war machine as up close as a civilian can. I'll never know what it's like. I don't know, a combat vet, I don't know what that's like, but I have seen it more up close than 95 to 99% of civilians will ever see it, American civilians, or Western civilians. So that whole journey. And then, after Trump won in 2016, and I voted third party. I was a Bernie supporter in 2016, but I was like, how are they? And I was like, I need to do something about this. So a former mutual friend of ours said, you should start a YouTube show, Graham. And I was like, okay. And so that started my journey of like paying way more attention politically than I ever had. And I finally was like done with the 2-party system, and I could let go of that, because I think you and I are similar. A lot of people, I voted for Obama in 2008. Like, this is going to, he's going to be different. He's going to be like FDR. And I had voted third party prior to that. 96, after Bill Clinton's first term, I was like, oh, fuck you. And I voted for a libertarian in 96, because I was like, I can't stand the Clintons. And they're half an inch to the left of the Republicans, liberalism. And so when I started like going down the road of independent media, like starting to follow people like Glenn Greenwald, and back before The Intercept kind of got co-opted, but when The Intercept, and found all these places like Consortium News, Black Agenda Report, and read Chris Hedges' book, and started reading Noam Chomsky's books, and was like, it was really taking, and having seen the war zone stuff up close, when I was like, man, I saw the military industrial complex like in action, man. Like, you saw it. And also getting out of my liberal cocoon. I remember in 2004 when John Kerry lost, I was all mad. The way some people have flipped out from what happened a month ago. I was like, wow, we got to stop Bush and John Kerry. And a friend of mine goes, the Democrats ran the wrong guy, and he had bad policy platform. I couldn't tell you what John Kerry's platform was to this day. I couldn't tell you what it was.
Yeah, me neither. And I was desperate to get rid of Bush. I think we all were.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have voted for a stale ham sandwich to get rid of Bush in 2004. And I still think, had Bush lost, we would be better off. I mean, when you look at what he did. But yeah, John Kerry was just such an underwhelming guy.
And an underwhelming campaign with an underwhelming platform and underwhelming policies. And I was so mad. And a friend of mine, another friend, said, you're in a liberal cocoon, Graham. You live in a liberal cocoon. And I was like, well, and then I started going to the war zones. Or I had just been to them for the first time. And I was like, then I started going more to the war zones. And so everything started, my point here is like, to your question of the cults, I started to kind of get out of the cult of red versus blue, the cult of my team good, your team bad. And when I started to pay attention and see how the media would, sometimes they flat out lie, but a lot of times I just saw they would just frame the story. They would just frame it a little bit, and they would not show you all this stuff over there, but just give you this part of the story. So this part of the story that they were talking about, they was accurate, but it didn't tell the whole story. And it was, and you started to see how it was deliberate, and you started to see, you know, Dianne Feinstein, when Mike Pompeo was being confirmed as the head of the CIA under Trump's first term, and he was pro-torture. And Dianne Feinstein's Twitter feed was, we're no to torture, Mr. Pompeo, and I'm fighting hard. And all of her liberal followers like, yeah, Dianne, you give them hell. And then I went to cabinetvotes.org, a website I never knew about, and she voted for him. And I was like, but your Twitter feed, and I was like, whoa. And I just started to see all that stuff. So
we get some really good actors in California. We really do. Actors. It rubs off on our politics. Like Adam Schiff, who made who knows how much money calling Trump a traitor and Russiagate and this and that. And then recently he voted to let Trump butcher any nonprofit he feels like. He had to vote no the second time because enough people called him out on it. But the first time he voted in favor of letting Trump do that.
So 2017, I started doing my show and started paying way more attention. And then I started to see, again, saw the Democrats vote for all of these Trump policies. Publicly, they were like, we're going to say no to you, Trump. And then they would vote for his policies. And they rubber stamped his judges. And if this is in 2017, I saw Liz Warren vote for all of this crap. And then she's like waving her fist at the Wells Fargo CEO. She's giving him the riot act. And he walked out of there with $120 million severance plan. And I was like, wow, Liz Warren could paddle my bare ass with a wooden stick in front of Congress. If you're going to give me $120 million, yeah, you can say whatever you want to me, man. You know, you could paint a red Z on my forehead. I don't give a shit for $120 million. And so as that was happening too, I was also going through some, repressed memories of some childhood stuff come forward, and I was doing work on that, and that was pretty challenging. So there was a lot of like, everything you thought was true is not, from a personal level, from a political level as an American. And during a lot of these revelations, you know, you'd go, what the fuck? You know, about something. You know, the first time I heard about Fred Hampton, I think, was in 2017 or 2018. When I heard an interview with Chris Hedges. I was like, I grew up in Chicago. How do I not know who Fred Hampton is? And it's like, oh, he was deliberately we were not taught about him deliberately. I didn't know who Henry Wallace was or Eugene Debs or any of these people because we're not taught them in school deliberately. And one of the things I thought of was like, it dawned on me that it was messed up that when we were living in Germany for a year as a kid, my dad is a theater professor and he had a Fulbright. He took us to Dachau when I was 6 years old. This is in my special manifest it. And so I was having all these kind of like epiphanies, and I was like, and I remember I saw my dad and I was like, hey Dad, I was 6. I go, don't you think I was a little young to take to a death camp? And he was like, yeah, I guess we didn't really think that through. Like, that's the most he could say to me was that. I was like, all right, thanks, Dad. That's parenting in the 70s. And so I started to realize, oh, America's a cult. American exceptionalism, all that stuff we've been told is a cult. You know, I went to Russia in 2019 and, you know, found out that 25 million Russians died in World War II, and they had female snipers and all this, you know, awful shit happened that we barely touched on in history class in high school, barely. And I was like, America, we're the good guy, you know, and like I interviewed Russians who were just like, Americans, you guys say you won the Cold War? No, we were sick of communism in our own country. We were like, we're done with this because the communist leaders were keeping all of the food and the resources and not giving it to us. We were sick of it. Like, what are you talking about, America? You think you did this? Like, it was eye-opening. I mean, and I started watching a lot of documentaries about cults. and researching them. And I've always been leery of cults from the jump. And I think this is because my parents took me to Dachau. I just at age 6 was like, oh, okay, so I don't trust people. I should just not trust people. And when they get into a big group, I don't trust them. And if everyone's thinking a certain way, I'm going to go the other way because I just don't trust that. I just don't trust everybody in groupthink. And it's even cost me money, even within the indie left YouTube world. When I went against everybody in that world 3 years ago, that cost me. But I was just like, you guys are all agreeing about shit, and I don't like it. So I'm not going to go along with you. So, I remember too. I was working on an online comedy news show in the late 90s. This is before people were going online. It was the Microsoft Network. And it was this early foray into TV shows on the internet. It was very like, what? No one's going to do this. Anyway, so it was called SC Naked News. And I remember they were passing some law about somebody was passing some law about the Church of Scientology. And a lot of my friends were like, they're attacking religion and it's wrong. And I said, the Scientologists, it's a cult. And they were like, Matt, they're like, Graham, that's what they said about the Nazis. And I go, they're a cult and they're manipulating people. Cause I saw it here in LA. You moved here and so
they have everything. They have every building.
They have every building. You started to see I went on some auditions that were at the Scientology Center, the Celebrity Center, and it was the weirdest, creepiest shit. You start meeting Scientology. That's the thing. California is this amazing place that attracts out of the box thinkers. It attracts the top 2% in every category, not just show business, but aerospace, engineering, sports. I mean, it attracts because it is this epicenter of high functioning, high achieving type people. But what comes with that is also a lot of nut jobs.
Right.
I want to be famous because I had a bad childhood or I'm crazy or just. So I saw Scientology. I was like, that's a fucking cult. And a friend of mine was arguing with me and I was like, and I let it go. And then about 3 months ago, he texted me. He goes, I remember that argument, Graham, and you said it was a cult. And I was arguing with you and you were right. This is 25 years later. So I think I've always just sort of had a little bit of a radar. There's some stuff I'm completely blind to and I've made dumb mistakes. I didn't get it. But with that kind of shit, I'm just I don't trust. I was raised Catholic. That's a cult. I saw Catholics turn a blind eye to the pedophile priest thing. I saw hippies. My parents are sort of new agey hippie people. I saw hippies. I just saw human beings are they will. And I had, we also had a Holocaust survivor speak at my high school. We had Holocaust Remembrance Week. And they said, fanaticism in any form needs to be watched.
Mm-hmm. That
stayed with me. And so whenever I see it, people getting too crazy about their sports team or whatever, and I like watching, I just was so I started paying close attention to cult-like behavior. And then the more I was studying stuff when I started doing my YouTube show, and hanging out with people like you and Lee Camp, and we were always just discussing all these ideas. I was and I started watching cult documentaries, and this isn't my special, but they all have the same pattern. It's always the same pattern. Somebody comes up with some good idea, let's make the world a better place, and we're going to use this doctrine or this religion, and it always starts out great, and then it goes, they get drunk with power. They were a sociopath from the beginning. But also, to backtrack too, talking about cults was a big thing in the 70s and 80s because you had the Manson family thing. You had Jim Jones. And the cult thing was a scary thing in the 60s and 70s. And there was that trend of, in the Midwest, some parents were like, we don't want our kids going to college in California because they're going to join a fucking cult and go bananas like that. That was happening.
I think my parents were still worried about that when I moved here.
I know it's, and when you have a lot of people that are lost souls, and I think that comes from maybe not having a great childhood, they are susceptible to somebody coming in and saying, I got all the answers. And there's a certain type of person that cult leaders are always charismatic. They're always, and there's female cult leaders, there's male cult leaders. I mean, and it's always the same thing. And they find a lot of broken people. Like this woman, her name was Gwen. It was an HBO doc, came out about 4 or 5 years ago. And she had she was a big Christian, but it was this weight loss thing. And so she was helping all of these people, a lot of women, lose weight. And it was through Jesus or whatever. And then of course she's, you got to pay 20 grand or whatever. Like I always saw the bullshit and everything. And then people had to pay all this money. And it's like, she was so nuts. But that was the thing too. Scientology was like, I remember when I went to the Scientology center and I was like, how much? Well, you just got to pay. It's like 15 grand to get clear. And I was like, wow, what a racket. And I think that's my skepticism from seeing Doc out at age 6 and then also living in Chicago. I got woken up. Madison, Wisconsin is very like white liberal. It's a lot of Leave It to Beaver. People are pie in the sky. They don't understand how anything works. Then you go to Chicago and it was sort of very gritty. And my 8th grade football team was a lot of blue collar working class kids. And I'd never been around working class kids. And a lot of the Chicago cops ran our team. And I learned so much stuff about the mob and street gangs and why they're doing this and drug dealing and the economics of it. And I saw how Chicago just works on corruption, just works on graft. You just have to grease the wheels in Chicago. So I developed a sense of like, oh, that's bullshit, And so I think to be a good stand-up comic, as Lenny Bruce said, you have to have a good bullshit detector. I think that's what makes most good comics. We're the ones sitting in the back of the room going, this is bullshit. Mm-hmm. That's what we do. That's what makes a good comic is we just go, wait a minute, that's bullshit. And sometimes it can be just contrarianism, just to argue. That can happen too. But
yeah, that we're going to dive into all that here in a little bit.
So anyway, that's my thing about how I started to be very leery of cults and cult-like behavior. And so now I'm debating whether I want to even stay in this country anymore because the MAGA people, not just the like, hey, I voted for Trump as the lesser of two evils. Those people are not like crazy, but the diehard MAGA people are like cult people. But the woke liberals are nuts. They are, and their reaction to Trump losing and their complete denial of how bad the Democrats are and how they ran another bad campaign with Dick Cheney endorsing you. Like we could go on and talk about this, you and I, and I'm like, and then all these women shaving their heads. I'm like, if you're shaving your head or you're wearing matching hats, you're in a cult. I hate to break it to you. And the thing with cult-like behavior, in covering the politics and going through my own journey of growing up in an alcoholic home and looking at cults, all three of these things have one thing in common. The whistleblower always gets attacked.
Yep.
The person who speaks up in the abusive family, the person who goes, wait a minute, this is a cult. We're not making the world a better place. This guy's stealing our money and he's having sex with all the girls or whatever. Or the person that says this country is corrupt, this government is corrupt, this corporation is corrupt. The whistleblower always gets attacked. So whenever that starts to happen, and I've gotten those attacks, I'm like, cult, I'm out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I've gotten those attacks on many different levels. So then to pivot into, a subset of cult, let's talk about just the YouTube space in general. I've said this before on my show to people who are relevant to the space. So I'll say it to you too. And you've heard me say this off mic plenty of times. But, I have followed this space for 20 years. For a while, I was just a fly on the wall. But, I was kind of radicalized freshman year of college because of the Iraq war and started paying attention to indie media. I studied media policy in grad school. It's been a part of my life even before stand-up was. And I've seen this space go from this obscure thing that only a handful of people knew about to a juggernaut in our media landscape. And I see it as a gross missed opportunity. I think that overall it has done a lot more harm than good. And I'm not saying that I'm some solution bearer or anything like that. I mean, and I've made errors in the past, but it is so sad to me. And it's just a space that I have had multiple peeks under the hood in multiple different capacities, ranging from, Stephanie Miller to the Young Turks to Jimmy Dore. And a couple years ago decided I don't want much to do with this space at all. I still enjoy talking politics, but I want to keep it at arm's length. I do some stuff with Status Quo now because I like that they're all about firsthand journalism. But I think the space as a whole is 90% garbage and just a bunch of high sugar fluff that just adds nothing to anything that's relevant for positive change. And it just bums me out. Now, that being said, if 90% of it's trash, that means 10% of it's good. So there is that. But that's been my takeaway, especially in the past few years. So I want to get your take on that.
I think the YouTube space is great. I think we're doing no, man. I mean, it's like, we've had this conversation privately a bunch, so it's probably good we're having it publicly because, when I started my YouTube channel and was just literally reading the LA Times at my breakfast table with my iPhone cam or whatever I was doing or whatever I was filming it on with bad lighting and all this other shit. I was not naive to think my little YouTube show was going to change the world, but I very much thought, and you and I, thought I want to be a part of a movement. And I wasn't naive, but I was, maybe still had hope in America. Like I still thought freedom of speech and YouTube, we can, I woke up. That's what my thing. Like I thought, oh, the Democrats are better than the Republicans. And I woke up that it's all bullshit. So maybe I can help wake other people up to this thing that the system is broken. And, because as I listed before, all those people I never heard about, you don't study Chris Hedges or Noam Chomsky in high school. You don't know Eugene. So it's like, so if I'm learning all about this, maybe because look, I'm a professional entertainer. I've done over 300 episodes of television. I can communicate quite well. I can communicate a point well, and I'm engaging, and I felt like I was good at this. I could do this, and I had a purpose in mind. And I didn't want to just be a frivolous comedian doing, game shows where people took their clothes off or whatever. Like frivolous entertainment's fine. I'm not, there's a place for it. And it's sometimes I need it to just unwind, but I wanted to be part of something more. I didn't just get into show business. That's why I went overseas. That's why I made a documentary about going to Afghanistan. That's why I did the podcast festival, was to connect with people on a better level without the barrier of mainstream media, a wall or a gatekeepers. And so I had this sort of like, yeah, man, we can do this. And I met you, and I met Lee Camp, and I met Jordan Sheridan, and all these people that were like Abby Martin were like, damn, these people are fighting the good fight, and Whitney Webb, and just like, people are really smart, sharp people are really getting into the space. And everyone sort of was like a Bernie supporter who was like disenfranchised with how he was cheated by the Democratic Party. And it was really like, we're doing something here. And doing those live Jimmy Dore shows, I remember walking off stage feeling like that was the most amazing experience I've ever had as a performer. Now, I've done big theaters and had standing ovations, but I wasn't getting them off of jokes that made a point until I started getting into this space. And I mean, going and doing the Jimmy Dore show in Chicago, my hometown, where I did my joke calling out the NFL's like corporate pro war machine and got an applause break. Like, Chicago's like Pittsburgh, man. It's the Bears and the Steelers. Like those two teams control those towns. Like all the other teams in those towns are like, oh, that's cool. But the football teams control those towns. So to have that, I was like very invigorated by it. And then 3 years ago, when everybody started fighting about vaccines and vaccine mandates, which seemed very curated. It seemed like the ruling elites were like, everyone was in agreement. Everyone was in the streets protesting during the George Floyd protests, and everyone was like tearing down statues and things were going to change. And then they were like, well, let's get everybody fighting with each other. And they interjected this thing, and they did a great job getting everybody fighting, and everyone became completely unreasonable. And, and then also, I was demonetized for 2.5 years. They took away 40% of my revenue. I got censored so hard. And then seeing like our mutual friend Lee Camp, when they yanked his 250,000 subscriber YouTube, they just pulled it when I was like, the times I would be on RT and people would like say I'm like a Kremlin puppet. I'm like,
oh yeah. Yep.
And the shit you'd be called. And then I was, when I, was suspect, and I was just calling out the hypocrisy of some of the arguments in the anti-mandate left. I was like, look, I get you don't want the government telling you what to do. I get that I have to take this vaccine, and I totally get that. But then some of the arguments, I'm like, well, those arguments are bullshit. And then I felt like, I don't know, everyone was, I'm not just going to agree. I don't agree with those videos I made.
A big part of the thing too was that it was either, and this can be applied to COVID or pretty much anything else. Everything was either 100% or 0%.
Yes.
There was no in between, no nuance, no context, no like analysis. It was either like, well, you're either for this or against it, and there's nothing. And so, especially when it came to COVID, you have two choices: either, lock down forever or fuck all. That's it. You're in one of those two camps. I think both of those camps are absolutely fucking crazy.
Yeah.
Because they are. But that was your choice. If you advocated for any type of caution, oh, you're a Fauci worshiping extremist, and it was so, it was impossible to even have a reasonable conversation. And I think a lot of people, even in the indie media space, they were happy to just fan that rage porn for people. Yes. And to me, it was just really, really sad to see. And it's just one of those things. I mean, you would see these people just walking on eggshells behind a webcam all the time. And it's like, this is freaking sad. And yeah, I mean, that whole thing. And it goes beyond, I mean, you could take that framework and apply it to multiple things, like where it's like, well, it's either 100% or 0%. And at times, that's the way to be. At times, it's like, well, you're either against a genocide or you're not.
Right.
Sorry. Those are your choices. So at times, that's the right way to be. But at other times, it freaking isn't. And, it's up to people to be able to distinguish between those two situations.
And there was no room for that, because it's like, right. I know people who are like, look, man, I have a friend of mine or a family member, and they were forced to get the vaccine for their job, and they got sick and died, and fuck big pharma. I get that. And I know people who are like, hey, man, they just opened everything up, and my family member with an autoimmune disorder is dead as a result of that. And so no one wanted to hear, like, are there people having injuries from the vaccine? Yeah, we should talk about that. But then no one still doesn't want, like, they don't want to hear about long COVID. They don't want to hear like how dangerous long COVID is and how it's impacting kids and the effects of this. Both sides wanted to minimize the other thing.
Right. Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's like, if you're going to talk about vaccine injuries, okay, that's fine. Are you going to talk about vaccine apartheid though? Are you going to talk about how they're keeping the formulas from people who want it? Are you also going to talk about, all the help that it has done? The fact that it does, help against long COVID and stuff like that, which long COVID is extremely dangerous. Are you going to talk about the actual dangers of COVID? And it seemed like, well, it was either one or the other. You couldn't do both. You couldn't do all the above. And I mean, throughout the entire thing, I was called everything from an anti-vaxxer, which is quite literally not true. I was called that. I was called I was called a medical fascist, whatever the fuck that means. I was called all of those things. And I don't think any of them are applicable. I mean, I thought, and, at first, when everything was just initially rolling out, I thought that we should have done something similar to what Denmark did. And I was like, I think the way Denmark's doing it is the right way to be. And we should solve our testing crisis first to do that. Because in Denmark, they had like that green pass situation where you either had to be vaccinated or have a negative test. Or I think there was even a third option where if you were recently recovered, then that qualified. And I was like, okay, I think that's probably the best way to do things. And so it was like, well, that's a vaccine mandate. And I'm like, well, I don't understand how it's a vaccine mandate when you have two other options, but call it whatever you're going to call it. And then, like, as time went on and it became obvious that, the virus is evolving faster than these shots are, so they're becoming less and less effective at preventing transmission, I actually thought, of all people and all places, Hollywood was doing the right thing, the way it was all about testing and the way that tests were provided on the company's time and on the company's dime. And I was for that. I'm like, anyone who's working in a warehouse, they should get a test provided to them by the company on the company's time and on the company's dime. And so they should be able to enter the workplace knowing that they're COVID free. I don't understand why anybody would be opposed to that. I don't understand why, well, except for the CEOs, but I don't understand why any working class person would be like, no, you're infringing on my right to be sick at work. Stop that.
I mean, it was just such a thing. We can go into so many of these details. I mean, everybody was cherry picking evidence and they only wanted to hear the stuff that confirmed their side. And they didn't, like it was, and I don't know that anybody wants to go look back and say, it was a scary time for all of us and not everybody reacted great.
Sure. I mean, I think everyone had their moments. I mean,
sure, we all had our moments. It was scary. It was like, I just wanted to go back to performing. I was living alone. I was in just isolation. I was starting to not, my mental health was not great because I was like alone and not performing and only doing video stuff. And it was crazy. And so like, anyway, I mean, that when I saw the crazy screaming cult-like behavior as a result of that, I mean, even when I saw everybody dancing in the streets when Joe Biden got elected, I was like, I'm glad Trump lost, but Joe Biden and like the selective outrage in this country, everyone, the liberals like calling out all of the hypocrisy of the religious right. And there's much to be called out. They are pretty crazy. And they, I believe in Jesus and guns. Like Jesus is pretty anti-gun. If you read the Bible, like the thou shall not kill seems like a pretty big one in their list.
That's pretty straightforward. Yeah.
But then, the liberals like believe all women, except Tara Reid. We're not going to believe her. Mm-hmm. Like that, the way she was treated was like abhorrent.
Yeah. That was pretty frightening.
And it just seemed like I feel like I'm in a country with competing cults. And I don't want to be around that environment because people will justify anything for crazy cult-like behavior. I mean, we just went through this election cycle where I'm sure you were, I was attacked by both sides because I was like, I'm not voting for either one of these idiots. And, I'm not happy Trump is president again, but I'd be honest, I'm glad Harris lost and she lost big. So I don't like, that does two things. One, you can't complain and say Trump cheated like you did in 2016. And now Trump has no excuses. His followers, I don't want to hear any bullshit from them. Like, you guys got the House, the Senate, and the Supreme Court. So I don't want to hear it. Like, you can't say you were both sides. That's the other thing. In 2016, the Democrats said they were cheated. 2020, the Republicans said they were cheated. And it created insane behavior, crazy behavior. January 6th was crazy. Mm-hmm. And people who minimize January 6th that's the other thing, going back to your indie media thing. I saw the indie media people just because AOC was like really rattled by January 6th. They're like, January 6th was nothing. And I was just like, well, nobody can say this sentence and make it go through their dumb, thick, stupid American head of two things can be true at the same time.
Right.
Americans cannot swallow that concept. Yeah. They cannot understand it. Neither side of the crazy vax thing, they didn't want to hear it. People are getting injured from vax, and long COVID's a real thing. Nobody wanted to. It was either all or nothing, like you said. Yep. So, and that's cult-like behavior, and I don't want to be in a cult, and I just don't.
Oh, it really is, man, and it is like police speak, and it's so ironic that the United States is a nation that celebrates free speech so much. Yet we can't even explore ideas with any type of analytic brain. It's just like, well, you're A or B, you're X or Y, and that's it. There's no context. If you acknowledge that vaccine injuries have happened to people, well, then you're an anti-vaxxer. Yes. If you acknowledge that the vaccines have done some good, well, then you're a Fauci disciple. If you, it's so ridiculous. And I think that, I mean, I know we've used that example a lot, but you can apply that to pretty much anything in our zeitgeist. And it's so freaking sad. And I think at the end of the day, it's because our system is just so fucked and the working class is just so fucked that people need to cling to political fan fiction to make deities out of these underwhelming idiots. I mean, you look at this clown car that's coming in, RFK, Tulsi Gabbard, Trump. These people are freaking. I wouldn't trust Elon these Musk. People to turn my porch lights off. I don't have a porch, but if I did, I wouldn't trust them to freaking do it. And and people are lionizing these people, which by the way is another element of cult. I mean, we both experienced that big time. I remember when I said that I was voting for Bernie Sanders and not Tulsi Gabbard, I got an email in the true aloha spirit from a Tulsi Gabbard supporter, and it said, "I hope you die without health care on the streets, abandoned the way you abandoned Tulsi." That's a fucking cult.
That's a cult.
That's not like supporting a politician because you think they'll support the policies you want. That's a fucking cult. That is a fucking cult,
dude. It's and everyone just picks their cult. They're whatever. And my cult good, your cult bad. I mean, it's just an insane. Those kind of emails. I mean, I remember I did. So in 2020, there was like Howard Hawkins or whatever, the Green Party candidate. There was like, there was a riff within the Green Party, which is like, why are you guys having a? And the Alaska Green Party made Jesse Ventura their, and I was like, wow, that's cool. And I remember I think I wrote in Jesse Ventura in 2020. That's what I did. And I was asked to do an online fundraiser for the National Green Party. Where I told jokes and they paid me a little bit of money. It was really cool. And I got this, I'm leaving your Patreon because you sold out the Green Party of Alaska. Like,
no,
dude,
God.
I'm sorry you're having a mental health crisis or you have unresolved childhood trauma. It ain't on me, man. Like,
I am so offended. You are telling jokes for someone I am aligned with on 95% of things. Like, jeez.
Like,
I mean, I'm a registered green. Like. I mean, I'm registered green because in California, I feel like there's no reason not to be. I mean, I was no party preference, and then I was like, you know what? I like having greens on the ballot to vote for. So I might as well like contribute my registration to helping them keep their ballot line. That's it, you know. And I've responded to all kinds of thoughts because of that. And you know, some people they're like, "Oh, well, the Green Party, da 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 da." And I'm like, "Yeah, I never said the Green Party was perfect, but you know what? If you want to make a third party, I don't know if better is the right word, but if you want to, you know, have input into a third party, you got to join one, first of all. And second of all, if you're looking for that perfect third party, let me know when you find it. I can't wait to join. You know, I've said that to a lot of people. Like when they're scrutinizing every single fucking political group, I'm like, hey, when you find the perfect group, let me know. I want to join that one,
dude. It's one of the things. Like, I'm so burnt out on this political space. And because of all this shit and the crazy comments and the people in the live chat, and there's a lot. I mean, we both have a really cool fan base that digs what we're doing, and that's awesome.
There's a lot of diamonds out there too. I mean, yeah, it's. Yeah. I mean, we mentioned some of the positive, but yeah, it's the positive is definitely freaking out there. And yeah, over the years, it's been out there too. I mean, you mentioned the live Jimmy Dore shows, which I mean, I had those were life-changing experiences. Yes. And it's, you know, it's kind of, it's a bummer, you know, it's a bummer, but.
Well, people go for money and power before everything else. And when people don't, the problem is the lure of fame and worship is far more enticing than the lure of let's all build community and build something together. You know, because building something together, there's not one person that's given the MVP award. It's all, we all did it. And so when you deal with human beings with ego, it's like, well, I did it. I should get the me, the my, me. It's like, that'll kill any movement and that'll kill anything. Not to mention then how people are very susceptible. Like the powers that be are very good at dividing and getting people to fight with each other. They're very good at that. They're very good. They infiltrate movements and get everybody fighting with each other. And I know that's what happened 3 years ago during the vaccine shit. I guarantee you the ruling elites went, or the CIA or whomever went, let's get all these people fighting with each other.
Well, there was definitely dark money floating around.
Yes.
You know, where I mean, you know, there's still speculation on what the details are. We don't need to like dive into that rabbit hole. All I'll say is I hope someday we find out the truth. I don't know what the truth is. You know, I don't have a smoking gun, but I feel like somebody does, and I'd be curious to know more at some point in time. But yeah, man, I mean, there's just, now that the indie media space, whatever you want to call it, is a force to be reckoned with, there's going to be powers that be that can just float a lot of money. And you just see it happen over and over again. And guess what? There's always more money on the right. That's why, I mean, as of the recording of this, that's why you're seeing, you know, TYT doing their quite literally a MAGA pivot, you know, and that's, I mean, and that's one of the big reasons why I say like this whole space has done more harm than good. Yes. I mean, if you're going to be anti-union, anti-rent control, you're going to be, anti-homeless, anti-trans, you're going to repeat propaganda, you're going to go endorse a Republican developer billionaire for mayor, that's fine. You have the right to do all those things. But please don't call yourself the home for progressives. You're misleading a lot of fucking people. A lot of fucking people.
Well, that's the other thing, too. We saw a lot of people go to the right because there's more money in the right, and right-wing cliques pay better, especially when the Bernie thing just collapsed. There was no more progressive left after he folded again and said, my good friend Joe Biden, and said, and everybody vote for Joe Biden rather than I'm your last hope, is what he should have said in March of 2020. And you saw everybody go chase right-wing cliques, and then you saw a few people go decide, I'm going to just be like an MSNBC, affiliate.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
if you want to cash in, those are your choices. Go
those are your
right
choices.
or go establishment dem. Those are your two
Yeah,
choices.
just make videos. Everything's Trump's fault. You'll do great, or just push right wing QAnon crap, and that's got like it's like RFK's got about 20-25% of what he says. I go, oh, that's a good point, and then
Is that high for you? I'd say there's a few. I mean, hey, if he gets sugar out of Coca-Cola, cool,
great.
cool, or makes it actual cane sugar, like that's cool. That's a small win in the big scheme of things, but cool. I'm on board with that. And healthy food's a good thing. Wow, that's a big. I mean, who's against that?
Right. I know.
So
if he wants to get the Monsantos and big ag out of, great. If he wants to have
believe
more
it when he does it there.
When he does it, right. He wants to have more vaccines get tested. Okay, that's fine. I like that. I like data and research. That's what all science should just be: data, crunching data. That's all we should be doing. And the numbers tell the story. The data tells the story. Crunch the numbers. That's it.
Yeah, but is that data going to be cherry picked like he does, though?
I know.
That's my concern. That's my concern. I mean, yeah, I'm fine with the idea. I mean, everything should be tested and should be safe. Absolutely. But if you're putting him in charge of the chariot, that is very, very concerning.
Yeah, he'll cherry pick it.
Oh yeah, and him being in charge of that. I mean, yeah, him being in charge of health is frightening beyond comprehension. I mean, I think it's one of the scariest things.
Yeah, but this country's already doomed. I mean, it's like. That's the other thing.
That's a good way to put a positive on it. But yeah, but we're fucked anyway.
It doesn't matter. I mean,
it's just one more guy.
What does it matter? I mean, like, what idiots would have Harris put in there? Would they be as extreme and dumb as him? No, but they would be bad. They wouldn't do good things.
Well, yeah. Well, it's like one of those things when a status quo is clearly broken, which it is. You either replace it with something better or something worse. And better wasn't on the menu. We had more of the same or worse. So people opted for worse. They took a chance on worse. So, yeah, I mean, things can and I think likely will get even worse. But would you say that when it comes to the U.S., you've ran the 5 stages of grief and have landed on acceptance? Because that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, I actually had to I was really there this summer when I was like, and I knew logically this election cycle would be nuts. I knew it. Mm-hmm. But when you actually see it live out, where you see Joe Biden in the debate with Trump, clearly doesn't know, clear cognitive decline, and then to listen to Democrats defend him, and even some big name liberal comedians that I respect professionally, defending him on social media with like millions of followers. I'm not naming names, but Patton Oswalt did that repeatedly. And I was like, dude, I was like, how can you say that? And that's when I was like, I'm in a cult. Because if Trump showed this kind of cognitive decline, liberals would be going, he's not fit to be president, and rightfully so. But they're going to just turn a blind eye to Biden. Doesn't know what day it is. Like him and Harris are still in power for another 5 weeks. What are they doing? I don't know. She's on vacation. He's wandering around the Amazon. Nobody knows what the fuck. Like, what is he doing? And then I just watched this over the summer. I'm like, I hate living here. I hate living here because the MAGA people, the diehard MAGA people, they're nuts. They don't want to listen to any facts on how crazy Trump is. The people that voted for Trump as the lesser of two evils, those people I get where they're coming from. I never would do that, but I get it. Fuck him. He's nuts, but fuck the whole system. I'm voting for him. I get that. But then with the thing is
that's never actually worked. I mean, I get how people come to that conclusion. I don't agree with it because it's like that never people said that was going to happen with Reagan and it didn't. Right. So it's like, I mean, it's kind of, I mean, I'm not going to like condemn that person or whatever, but I think their pretzel logic is very lazy and annoying.
Of course, it's America. Everybody's lazy and annoying. This whole country is lazy and annoying. Like, and the liberals are lazy. And the liberals were screaming, "What about women's rights?" And it's like, I don't have time to explain to you all the ways the Democrats have undermined Roe v. Wade in the last 15 years. Like, you don't want to hear it. You don't want to listen to it. You don't care when I tell you. And I'm like, I'm living in a cult, and I'm, just attacked on both sides. And I mean, Rashida Tlaib, Palestinian Democrat for Congress, not allowed to speak at the Democratic convention.
Yeah. Goes on to clean up in the election.
Wins with 70% of the vote, just under 70% of the vote, in a state where Harris got 48.4% of the vote. And nobody wants to talk about that. They just, like, Bill Maher won't say it in his dumb things. Like, and I'm so tired of, and when I debate these people, they never know as much as I do. They don't have as much information. I'm not saying I'm smarter than them. I'm just saying I know more of these numbers. They were like, oh, I didn't know that about her. Or just like, there's an interview of I could list anything that I'm like, I have more access to this. And I know they don't know what they're talking about because I used to be that guy. So, and are you aware of who Rashida Tlaib is? I'm not sure. Who is she? So you don't even know who she is. Well, I'm going to tell you how she won with 70% of the vote. A thing you can go look up online right now. And then you're still going to listen and go, yeah, but men, or whatever. Like, I don't want to listen to the MAGA dipshits. I don't want to listen to the religious right. They're a crazy cult. And the liberals they're worse. I'm sorry. They are worse because they're college educated. They should know better, and they don't. And their arrogance to hear, Ron, for 8 years, the same stupid, crazy, like, Medicare for all, that'll never work. Give people policies like Bernie was right when he came out and said, worker policies, there's much to be critical of Bernie on, flawed, how he ran he could have fought harder, whatever. Those are all debatable things. But him saying workers' issues, working family issues, that's what you should have run on rather than running to the right and be endorsed by Dick Cheney. And then I still see liberals on social media like mad at Bernie. You're still mad at Bernie from 8 years? You guys ran, you think we don't want a female, America's sexist. It doesn't want a female president. No, there's going to be a female president, and she's going to be a Republican, and it might be Tulsi Gabbard. And then what are you going to do?
Hopefully be living somewhere else by that point. My God. Yeah, that's frightening. I think the thing with liberals, and I'm sure everyone listening knows this, but we're distinguishing between liberals and leftists. But the thing with like the contemporary American liberal is they are so, like you said arrogant. And yeah, it's like they have this pretentiousness and they have nothing to be pretentious about, because it's like, dude, you lose to fascist half the time. Half the time you lose to fascist, you stand for nothing, you have no policies, all of your political ideology is just half-baked neoliberal bullshit. That's why there's nothing quite like the Democratic Party anywhere else in the frickin' world. Every other centrist party, and I'm not saying like I'm on board with it, like I'm not saying like, oh man, labor's great, like I'm not saying that, but compared to the Democrats, they're fucking like they at least have, social spending plans and things like that. Like they're at least actually a center or center left experiment. I mean, the Democrats are just, they'd be considered right wing anywhere else. And it's like, why are you? Well, what are you proud of? Like how are you proud? Like, I get if you're a registered Democrat, because like what fucking choice do you have? It's, there's some states where if you're not registered with one of the major parties, you can't vote on basically anything. Like you'll get your ballot and you can only vote on what day trash collection is. So I get it. I feel fortunate that I live in California where that's not my situation. But if I lived in one of those states, I'd probably be registered as a Democrat because I don't want to not be able to vote on anything. And those are the rules we need to frickin' change. Somebody should be able to register as a green or whatever else. But like,
no one wants to learn. They don't want to learn. Ron, they've been making the same mistake for 8 years. They don't want to learn from their mistakes. The complaints after Trump won again were the same from 8 years ago. They don't want to learn. That's cult-like behavior. That is Catholics saying, hey, stop bad-mouthing the Catholic Church. There's just a few bad apple priests not wanting to hear it. And the whole Democratic Party and so many of their constituents are, we're smarter than you. We know more than you. Shut up. We're from the smart states. You're all dumb. Vote for us. Shut up and vote for us. But if you don't, you're a sexist and a racist. And weird, that strategy backfired.
Yeah, it's wild how that didn't work.
That's weird.
Yeah. It's the same thing they did in 2016.
Same thing.
Let's go to the Rust Belt where people have been suffering for generations and tell them how dumb they are.
Yes.
And see if they vote for us this time. Maybe we'll tell them they're dumb in a more polite way. Let's see if that works.
And all of those polls from 2020 that had Bernie beating Trump, like the Fox viewer poll, where they gave Bernie a 6-point win over Trump. So Fox viewers were going to give Bernie a win. That means he would have won overwhelmingly. And the Democratic Party squandered that, deliberately crushed that guy. Obama participated in that, and liberals went along because it's like their centrism. I want to say this to the dumb fucking liberals. Your centrism, if Joe Biden would have lost in 2020, we'd be done with Trump. It'd be over. He'd be done in January 20th. Now we get 4 more years of him again. So it's like, you guys are so bad, and you embrace centrism, and your centrism brings fascism. Centrism enables fascism.
That's how it works. And even beyond, like neoliberalism, like laissez-faire capitalism, which is what the Democrats are all about, and the Republicans, of course, they just add, xenophobia and racism and all that other stuff. So it's like, you're just in a ping pong volley between those two things. And when you only have 2 options because, Wall Street controls it, what are you going to do? I mean, it's like we're just in like a never-ending volley between like 2 of the worst economic systems that you can imagine. And it's like eventually the rubber band's going to snap.
Trump's going to be deporting all these people. You know who's deporting a lot of people right now? Joe Biden is. He's deporting a lot of people. There's people in cages. And wait, who built the cages? Oh, that's right. It was Barack Obama and his vice president. I forget his name. Mo Flyden or something. I forget his name. Like, it's such a joke and no one wants to hear it. And when people talk, or then you got to listen to the conservatives who are like, Kamala Harris was a communist. Oh God.
I wish.
I
would have loved to have voted for the Kamala Harris that the right wing described her as. If that person was real, I would have voted for that person. Let me tell you.
Absolutely.
I would have been thrilled. That person was
AOC
real and had a chance.
Like AOC's this. Oh God, I would love if they were. AOC was still out.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it's like you just see these, and I think that gets into like just the whole political fan fiction of it all, because you see all that, and then to be fair and talk about the other swing of that pendulum. I mean, you have people sanitizing what Trump actually is, sanitizing the whole MAGA thing, and playing this fantasy that no, Trump's going to be for the working class. You out of your mind? Trump wouldn't even know how to do that. And Trump doesn't really stand for anything. It's just who he surrounds himself with. So look at who he's surrounding himself with. You think that's going to be better on foreign policy? You think that's going to be better on domestic issues? I mean, it is political fan fiction, usually just being contrarian for the damn hell of it, instead of being contrarian when it's the right thing to do. And it's just really bizarro pretzel logic that hyper online people cling to, in most cases because they just don't have any other community anywhere else, and because they need a solution for, what's going on in the country.
It's an insane asylum. I mean, Ron, it's like it's like dealing with an active addict or alcoholic or drug addict. And you can go to them and try to have an intervention and say, you got to get clean, you got to get sober. And if they don't want to get sober, they're not going to, and you have to get out of their way. There's a great Russell Brand, before we found out he was a rapist, that's now come to Jesus, whatever, nutbag.
Oh, yeah, he's a Christian now. That's right.
Oh, he's a Christian now. Oh, he's accused of rape, and now he's like Jesus. Interesting. But he said something about Amy Winehouse, because he's a recovered heroin addict. And he said about an addict, he goes, here's the thing with an addict. And he's talking about drug addicts, like heavy drug addicts. He's like, you're going to get a phone call. You're either going to get a call saying, hey, man, I got sober. I'm sorry I was such an asshole when I was using, and I apologize. Or you're going to get a call saying, so-and-so's dead. They OD'd and died. He goes, but you're going to get a phone call. So America, we're going to get a phone call. And either America is going to just like, oh, America's dead. They OD'd and died and it's over. And whatever, civil war or the 50 United States is going to be broken up or something. There's going to be a financial collapse when Trump's in office. Because again, he's going to do. America is an addict. They're addicted to the two-party system, and they're addicted to the red versus blue rage porn. Liberals are addicted. They're addicted to this. What? Trump derangement syndrome is a crack pipe. And the right is addicted to those communists in the Joe Biden administration are going to make all of our kids trans or whatever their nutburger thing is. The religious right is a cult. The Republican Party is a cult. The Democrats are a cult. The woke left is a cult. And America overall is a cult. The cult that we're this country that can fix itself. America was built on lies, like most cults. It was built on genocide or slavery. If you watch Government Secrets at Lead Camp, and I do, all America has done, the CIA has overthrown all these countries. We're done. And then even then, like liberals were like, yeah, but Putin, like liberals are okay with war when the Democrats do it. It's a form of insanity that I just can't listen. One of the things I've learned, having been sober for a long time, if somebody really wants help, man, I can get them help and we'll go to a 12-step meeting. But if they don't want help, you have to get
There's
the fuck
you can
out.
Do. Yeah.
You have to get out of the way, because an active addict that's going down hard, they're so selfish and in such crazy denial, they will bring those around them down. They will fucking crash and burn, and anyone in there, they do not care about collateral damage. They actually get off on it because addicts have such self-hatred and self-loathing that me being such a fuck up that fucks your life up and now you hate me, that actually feeds my self-loathing. So I'm totally cool with that. In the sick psychosis of an active addict, which is what America is.
Well, we're just about to the hotel, man. So time to wrap this up. We're just I feel like, this was supposed to be an interview about you. I feel like it sort of was a little bit.
Well, we got into politics, and then you and I were just going to start talking politics.
Yeah, man, it happens. There's definitely those kind of episodes. Well, for anyone not in the know, where can people go to learn more about you?
You can go to GrahamElwood.com. My comedy special, Manifested, is out. It's on Apple TV and Amazon. And then I have a new comedy Christmas album, A Socialist Christmas with Graham Elwood. It's on iTunes, Amazon, and Spotify. It's all me singing and reading some like Eugene Debs poems and stuff. And it's all original music. And it was a lot of fun. So check out A Socialist Christmas. Go buy that. You can download it. You can pre-order the vinyl album. And if you download it, give it a 5-star review and positive stuff and spread the word, because it was a lot of fun to make. And it calls out all of the craziness of America in a very fun, festive Christmas way.
Like you do. Well, thanks for doing this, man.
Thanks, dude. Yeah, I went into another fucking rant on one of our YouTube shows, but
that was Graham Elwood. Check out his Christmas album, 'Tis the Season. Music for the 1000 Podcast is provided by Andrew Saxon. Be sure to check out his podcast, the Baywatching Podcast, wherever you get your podcast. Leave us a 5-star review if you would. Every 5-star review really helps this show. And if you want to support this show on the sustainability end, you can do so over patreon.com/Ron Placone. For Give What You Can level, you get all kinds of exclusive content, full stand-up clips, not available anywhere else. We do Zoom Hangouts. It's a really cool gathering. We got a cool community going on, and that's all for Give What You Can level. Even $1 a month goes a long way. Well, the day that this episode drops is Christmas Eve. So for everyone who celebrates the Christmas holiday, Merry Christmas and happy holidays to everyone, whatever you do or do not celebrate. Hope you find some peace and spend some time with people you love. At the end of the day, that's all it's really about. And thank you so much for being here. This podcast means a lot to me. It enriches me an awful lot. And I hope it does the same for you too, because that's what it's all about. See you next week. Peace. Hey guys, Ron Placone here. Take your own 1,000 challenge. No, you don't need to interview 1,000 people, although if you want to do that, go for it. Your 1,000 challenge can be whatever you want. Maybe you want to call a friend out of the blue once a week. Maybe you want to read a book every month. Maybe you want to start a different garden every season. I guess that might be dependent on where you live. Look, the point of the challenge is taking on an endeavor that enriches your life in some way, and it can be measured. And then, of course, you do it regularly. That's what 1,000 is doing for me, and hopefully for you too. The main reason for this podcast and every podcast I've ever done is to build community. So take your own challenge. Then join our Facebook group. It's called 1,000 What's Your Challenge? ? That's 1,000 What's Your Challenge ? And post about what your 1,000 challenge is and the progress you're making. All I ask is that people be encouraging of each other's challenges. This is personal and vulnerable, so be cool. There's enough negativity on social media. We don't need to add to it. For those of you who aren't on Facebook, hopefully in the future we'll be expanding to places like Discord, Reddit, but for now, we're starting on Facebook. And again, that Facebook group is called 1,000 What's Your Challenge? See you there.